Call this workshop meeting of the Jacksonville City Council to order. Council, you have a copy of the agenda for tonight's meeting at your place, and I would entertain a motion at this time to adopt that agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We also have two sets of minutes, one from the February 16, 2016 regular workshop meeting, one from the February 16, 2016 regular meeting, and there are five consent items on the agenda. Motion to adopt.
I think we never voted on the other motion there.
Oh, we didn't?
Yes, sir.
Can we do it all at one time?
Yes, if they want to amend it and
Sure,
do it all
sure,
at
I'll
one
do
time.
that.
I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. I
That's all
overlooked
right.
it. All those in favor of the first motion?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All opposed? Okay. We have a motion on the second. There was a second motion, right?
Not yet.
It's not been made on the minutes and the consent items.
I'll move it.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you. Any discussion?
Yeah,
All right.
there are two of these items, resolution refinancing of revenue bonds and budget. I don't have any problem with either of them, but these items, I'm sure, are made available to the public
Yes,
for
they are.
review. If you were a member of the public and looking at the general budget amendment, the explanation is kind of vague. You wouldn't know really the revenues that are being produced and what they're being used for. And the same thing on the revenue bonds. If you didn't go to the resolution itself, you wouldn't know you would know we were refinancing, but you wouldn't know what those bonds had been issued for. All I'm saying is that, particularly if the public is looking at consent items and we're not going to discuss them, it behooves whoever in the staff is preparing them is to make it complete as possible so that anybody picking up on to read those items has a complete understanding of what they are. That's all.
I kind of agree with Mr. Bittner, his concerns there also. Maybe we need to put a little bit more in here.
We can certainly do that, yes, sir.
information-wise.
And if you would like, we can certainly take just a moment for Gail to come up and give a very quick overview of those bonds.
I know what they're for.
Okay.
I think we're good for this time, but in the future, when we post these agendas out early, give any interested party, like you were talking about, an opportunity to see
I
exactly.
do have a question. Gail, the first time we just went out and advertised locally, but now it seems like it's going to take 2 months to go back out and advertise on this one. I was curious, are we doing something different on how we place these bonds, or?
Yes, sir. Originally, we sent out a request for proposals and we asked for bank placement
Okay.
financing, which is an institution buys all the bonds in a bulk. We got a really good rate. We went back to the bank, told them, hey, we're excited, we're going to do this. They increased the rate. And we said, that's not what the council approved, so we're not going to be able to do this. In the meantime, the public placement, which is where we sell to many bondholders, and it does take a little bit longer, that improved. So we're going to go with that
And we think
option.
it'll stay improved over the 2 months while we advertise and do all, coordinate with all the folks? We hope.
We think so.
Okay.
And the difference, the first placement, we were going to save, what, about $90,000?
No, it was 1.7.
1.7 million.
Yeah,
That's the
and-
reason why she does financing.
Maybe the first year.
We've all figured out Clemson math at this point, so.
What's the projected savings then by doing it a different way?
Right now, we're in the ballpark of $2 million, but we won't know exactly until we price the bonds, which is in April.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I thought I'd ask.
But just for the
Rather
sake
than
of
assume.
transparency, though, I
Yeah.
think that's a good
We
idea.
will certainly improve the information that we provide. Good point.
You need a vote.
Yeah, call the
All
question.
those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. Our first workshop topic for tonight is a draft of FEMA flood maps, and I assume that Dr. Woodruff, you're going to handle this.
Yes, Ryan is going to really make a presentation. As we all know, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Act, requires communities that are water-oriented communities to have a FEMA program. We have seen the benefits of that program nationwide every time you have some type of major flood, major storm. There are changes that come periodically as the federal government reviews their maps. We're currently in the process of working with the FEMA agencies through the state of North Carolina, and Ryan is going to give you an overview of the potential changes and the impact that we're going to see from those changes. Please.
Thank you, Dr. Woodruff. Good evening, Mayor, Council. So the city of Jacksonville participates in the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP for short. That program allows flood insurance to be available to our citizens, and it also makes the city do certain things with notifications every year. So we recently sent out a notification to our repetitive loss area and to the realtors, lenders, et cetera, just letting people know, hey, there are flood zones. If you don't have flood insurance, you may want to consider getting flood insurance. If you're not sure, contact us. And with those public outreach things that we do, we get graded, and that helps people get reduced rates. And I'll get into that a little bit further. But it provides the framework in which we kind of advertise and share information. The part of the program sets minimum floor elevation. So we're, say at this building here, we're 10 feet above the sea level. We may have a flood elevation of 4, which means we're already 6 feet above it, which means it's going to take a lot of water to flood this building. But in some cases, near streams, rivers, et cetera, you may be at 4, and if they project the water will rise to 7, that's our base flood elevation. You need to build above that line, and then the city has something that's called a freeboard, which is 3 feet, which means we go 3 foot above that. What that does is that allows more credit points, which I'll explain to that here in just a second, that helps us get cheaper insurance for our citizens. It also diminishes the likelihood that that structure will flood. The city of Jacksonville is currently at basically the same thing as we hear the ISO rating for fire. We have an ISO rating or CRS rating for flood, which we're currently at an 8. We have been informed that we're going to be moving to a 7. We're waiting for DHS and FEMA to let us know that that's official before May 1st, and we're going to be moving to 7. Well, what does that mean? Basically, as you can see on the chart to the right, we're currently an 8 because we've scored credit points between 1,000 and 1,499. So people that are in the flood hazard area, the special flood hazard area, they are eligible for a 10% premium reduction. Now, if you don't live in the special flood hazard area and you want to carry flood insurance just in case the water rises an awful lot, then you get a 5% reduction. Well, because of our efforts and some changes that's been made to the program, the city of Jacksonville scored at about 1,550. What does that mean? That means that the people that are in the special flood hazard area are going to get an extra 5% savings, or 15%. That's good, and I'll explain that a little bit more here in a few minutes. One of the reasons why we were able to score between the 1,500 and the 2,000 is because we have that 3-foot freeboard. If we reduce that freeboard, we're going to lose points, and it won't take many before we drop back to an 8. Council can decide, hey, we want to amend our special flood hazard ordinance and reduce the freeboard because that may reduce cost of building a home, but it's also going to cause insurance premium savings to go down. I'll give an example of that here in a minute. One reason why you would consider getting flood insurance, even though you're not in a flood zone, 20% of all claims come from areas that are outside that flood hazard area. So just because you're not near a river or you don't think your house would flood, it's possible. And 20% of the claims have been for just that reason. Another thing is if you go ahead and purchase a policy before new maps go into effect, will maximize your savings. Well, our current firm maps, which is flood insurance rate maps, were from 2005. That's what we've been operating underneath and still are today. We've been hearing for the last 2 years that we're going to be getting new maps. Well, we're told that they're coming in 2016. Now, they've bumped it before, but we are in full belief that they are going to come this year. Well, why do they need to update that? Well, advances in technology, GIS, surge analysis, updates to the modeling are all reasons why they need to make sure that it's in line with what they expect based on previous storm events, et cetera. What does this mean for Jacksonville? We think the elevations will increase based on what we've seen. There's currently about 500 structures in the special flood hazard area. Based on information that we have received, we're going to go to over 1,300. So it's going to mean 800 or some new structures will be required to carry flood insurance if they have a mortgage through a national, fairly regulated or insured lender. That's why that premium reduction is going to benefit them, which is why we will strongly need to consider staying at a 7 versus reducing that freeboard. Get into that a little bit more later on. So we think that that's a substantial number, obviously going from 500 to 1,300, that's a rather large increase. And going from 4 feet in some areas to 10, we have a 3-foot freeboard now, so that means the house is at 7. That means some houses or structures could potentially be 3 foot below the new base flood elevations. Their premiums will be even higher. So what do we think the tentative schedule is going to look like? We have been told that they're going to release the maps for public review, comment, and appeals in April of this year. There'll be a 90-day appeal and comment period. Then they will try to resolve the appeals and protests. And then there'll be a 6-month compliance period. That means that we will bring forward a floodplain ordinance amendment to City Council referencing the new maps. We can do that ahead of time. Why would we want to do it ahead of time? Well, if we're going from a 4 to a 10, we could see a mass influx in permits trying to beat the new law because they can go to 4 feet or 7 feet instead of going to 14 feet. So that's something that we'll have to seriously and strongly consider whether we go ahead and amend that ordinance ahead of time. So recommendation, staff is going to assist owners with existing structures that are impacted by new elevations. There's things that can be done. Houses can be lifted. There's grant programs that are out there to assist with that. One other item that we are recommending is that there's Wrightsville Beach dealt with a similar situation with the new flood maps with the overland study. We sent in a management report last week. We would like to hire this consulting firm to analyze the 4 terabytes of data that the state has to see if there's any discrepancies that may be in those models that may, equal a lesser base flood elevation. For example, we've heard that at the North Carolina-South Carolina line, there's a 1-foot difference between the 2 states just by simply crossing the border. So that means that the South Carolina models might be a little bit different than North Carolina. Maybe South Carolina's are more correct than ours. Maybe ours are more correct than theirs. We won't know that unless we have this firm, which is an international company, the town of Wrightsville Beach used them, to actually study the data. And that phase 1 would basically be, we think there's some things that we can appeal, or it looks pretty solid, there's really nothing worth advancing from an appeal standpoint. Let's see. As I stated, council will have to really consider, do you leave the 3-foot freeboard underneath the new flood maps? Right now, if it's a 4, they got to build a 7. If they go to 10, that means they're going to have to build a 13. That's 6 feet taller than what they could build today. I don't know what that equates to in construction costs, but there's got to be some.
Let me ask you a quick question. How long has the 3-foot freeboard requirement been in effect?
The current ordinance was adopted, I believe, in '05, so at least since '05, if not before then. Let's see, to give you an idea on why we are recommending that we keep a 3-foot freeboard, as you can see here in this diagram that we pulled, because we thought this was the most simple example to give you. If you're at 3 foot above base flood elevation, you get the most reduction in premiums you can, and this is probably based on about a $200,000 house, $427 annual premium. If you're at base flood elevation, that premium goes to $1,400, and if you're below, $9,500, 4 feet below. So it's going to depend on where you are and what your elevation is to determine that. How do you determine elevation? You've got to get a surveyor to perform an elevation certificate. So of those new structures that are being put in the flood zone, both commercial and residential, they're going to be required, when the insurance company says when the mortgage company says you've got to obtain flood insurance, the only recourse to that is to hire a surveyor, demonstrate where you are actually on the ground. If you're above it, then you don't necessarily have to have the flood insurance. If you're below it, then you will. And the premiums will adjust based on your actual situation.
And that not only applies to new construction, I want to stress the fact that whatever changes finally get adopted, that will impact anybody who currently has a federally insured mortgage. I mean, so for example, if you're in Bay Shore across the street here from City Hall, and you've been paying on a mortgage for 10 years, and you've not had any flood insurance requirement, and let's just say, for example, that part of Bay Shore is now going to have that. Those people, for the rest of their mortgage, they're going to have to carry flood insurance. And that's where the real financial impact to your residents is going to come.
So some other impacts that the city of Jacksonville is going to see, and the builders and the buyers are going to see and feel: the design and structures, what it costs, and how it looks. This is an example of here in Jacksonville. This is over near Elizabeth Lake, right there at Red Oak Street. I'm sure that many of you have seen it, if not all of you. This is a flood zone right here by the creek that went into Elizabeth Lake. As such, they could build here because it wasn't a floodway. It was just a special flood hazard area. They had to elevate 3 foot above that elevation. So that's, if I had to guess, that's probably a good 8 feet up in the air. Some other examples of things that you can do. This is not quite as severe. This is a flood vent. These are things that will be required when construction's built. This obviously would have a very low to the ground base flood elevation, or a low freeboard requirement, which would allow them to have, what is that, about a 3 foot tall porch. So they don't have a very high elevation there. So it may look more normal than that, but there's just 2 examples. Another example, this is down at Osprey Point. This area is not currently in a flood zone. So they built this style, beach house style. They raised it up, parking underneath, living space on the 2nd and 3rd floor, not because it was required, but because that's what they chose to build down there. But that's the style that you may see in areas that are now going to be in that special flood hazard area. This is Greenville. This area was impacted pretty heavily by Hurricane Floyd. They're still there. They've not been bought out, more than likely because they built higher than the regulations were in place with the apartments next door that are no longer there. But they were also built elevated. So it's not that you can't build in an AE zone, you just have to elevate. That means the HVAC units are elevated, the electrical components are elevated, and if Greenville only has a 1 foot freeboard or 0, then it won't be as high. Jacksonville, we have the 3 foot, which gets us points and saves on premiums. And then if there's a map update later on and it goes up 2 feet, then those people will still be out of the flood zone. So that's another benefit of keeping that 3 foot freeboard, is as subsequent maps are revised in the future. We were told that these new maps do not include any sea level rise. So if there's a determination later on that these maps need to be updated later on to, include a 2 foot level in sea level, then those maps will be revised again and increased. But these maps, this update, we were told, do not incorporate sea level rise.
Then why do you think there's still such an expansion of the zone?
That's a very great question. Surge. We have been told it is based on the models of surge. They studied this, so many storms, this duration, this path, and the modeling is basically saying that the water in the river is going to back up and push up into town and cause the creeks and the river to rise during a hurricane. That may be a Category 5, sitting there for 24 hours, over Wilson Bay. I don't know, because I haven't seen the models that they use, and it's probably, several models thrown into one with different storm events. But that's why we believe that ours are going up, is because they're factoring in a different level of storm surge than what we had in the previous maps.
Now, let me also address that. In our preliminary discussions with the state staff that's been working on this and their consultant, they have not modeled our basin. As we all know, our river is what I'm gonna call a self-contained river. It doesn't start somewhere up near Greenville and flow down here. The models that they have used are what I will call a typical riverine system. We are not a typical riverine system. We have taken time to pull out historic photographs of the worst hurricanes that have occurred here in the last 20 years. And we can tell you that none of those photographs that were taken at the height of the flooding show anything as severe as what these proposed elevation changes show. The problem is, if I may use the term politely, you're dealing with technocrats. Since I've been here 5 years, this is one of the first times that I have ever brought to you the C word, correct? Now, a consultant who specializes in this type of analytics is far more capable of fighting this battle than the staff is. The estimate that we have is $10,000 for this person to do what we call a cursory overview to tell us, do they see any potential for us to try to get these levels lower? We feel like for $10,000, that's a fairly good investment. Because I will say to you again, you're dealing here with a specialty. You're not dealing with, when we talked to them before, we said, look, we can bring all these photographs that will show you that at the USO, here's where the worst storm, what was the big hurricane here? Fran. Here's photographs of Fran. Down at Sturgeon City, here's the photographs of Fran. But what we will tell you is that the maps that we have seen, which are simply preliminary maps, will take a significant amount of Jacksonville that we cannot document has ever flooded in the worst storm and make those homeowners buy flood insurance if they have a federally insured loan. Yes, sir.
3-foot freeboard area. What's the history on that? I should know, but I was around here then, but is it just related to, that's a good figure to reduce, to gain extra credit points?
Councilman, I'm not sure what the rationale is, but obviously there are some things, I think, because we are a coastal community. And, if you go 3 foot, 3 is better than 1 in terms of as map updates occur. It obviously creates a reduction in premium points. The higher you go, it gets us points to get that higher reduction in the premiums.
But I want to stress, we're not asking you to endorse the 3-foot freeboard at this time.
I understand.
We have had the 3-foot freeboard since you said '05?
At least.
Okay, at least that date. We can go back and give you more data on that. When we finally look at this, if we cannot find justification to convince the regulators that this, let's say, 10-foot is the wrong elevation, then we will come back to you and say, okay, then do you want to simply leave it at 10 foot and have no freeboard? And if you do, please understand the consequences on the insurance savings. If you want 1 foot instead of 10 foot, meaning 11 foot, or 2 foot as freeboard, or 3 foot.
Cost benefit.
Yeah, we will have to look at the cost benefit analysis. The reason why we're bringing this to you now rather than when the maps come out is because all you have is 90 days. Anyone who has worked with the federal government on a census or on any significant rulemaking knows that while it sounds like the government's giving you a lot of time to participate, 90 days is not a lot of time.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
That's a 90-day process to appeal their ruling?
Correct. Once they publish their maps, now correct me if I'm wrong, once they publish the maps, and let's just say they're currently telling us that they're gonna publish them in May,
April.
April.
in April.
But we've
Okay.
also heard March 30th. That's the thing, it's been a moving target.
Well, let me ask you this question to follow that up. Is anybody aware of what the history is as far as them overturning their original assessment?
You wanna talk about the
I
consultant?
mean, we've talked about showing historical data, and I think the way that it works is, okay, well, show us an area, and we'll look at that area, and we may make an adjustment. We looked at it a little bit more holistically, looking at going from 500 to 1,300 structures, as well, can we look at the modeling? Something off with the modeling is, did they factor in a category 5 and it was a little bit too long? I mean, is it a 500-year storm versus, and I know they don't like to use the years, and we say 1%, or a lot of lay people say 100-year storm. Well, was this a 100-year storm, a 1% storm that they factored in, or was this closer to a 500? Anything that we can do that may demonstrate that this is off, if we're successful in doing that, it's gonna basically be adjusted citywide, because the model changes, not just one property.
The county, we've also met with the county, and the county's aware of this, and the county is trying to determine what they're going to do. Because obviously, the coastal areas, Swansboro, North Topsail, all of that, they're going to be impacted significantly more than our 1,300 units that are gonna be impacted. What they are going to do, we do not know.
Is there any potential of sharing the study if we decide to hire a consultant, where we share with Swansboro or the county or whatever, and just to see if there's some cost savings?
Well, we've talked to the county about that. We don't know what they're going to do. The other part is, most of the things that are gonna impact Swansboro and North Topsail and the area down at Sneed's Ferry is gonna be storm surge, that wave attenuation.
Wait, what?
Wave action.
Wave action.
So it would be a different type of study. It would really be, the long-term surge up in here. We can certainly approach that.
John, you have a
Well, I
point.
was going to point out, I think going back to your question, Mayor, this particular company was successful for Wrightsville Beach as far as the wave action. They did an analysis there, and the mayor was asking how often these regulators change their mind. Can you?
Yeah, so they're still going through the appeals process, but what ATM, or Applied Technology and Management, has shared with us, and I've talked to the Wrightsville Beach town manager and the town planner, is that everything so far has been a go for the appeal from the technological standpoint with the technocrats. It's now got to go through the process. So they kind of held up the New Hanover County maps from being adopted because of that appeal. So they're not asking for anything further, it's just got to go through the process. And once that appeal is adopted and the maps are revised for the coastal overland wave action, then, that will be deemed a success. Right now, it's not been approved, but all of it points to a success.
But that does not mean that we will get a report back from the phase 1 that we're asking the person to do. It could come back very realistically that says, folks, it is what it is. That's why we're not interested in investing a significant amount of money until we really have this professional company look at it and say, here are the flaws, or we really can't find any flaws.
Right. Well, I think we have an obligation to our taxpayers and citizens to at least do that, as far as have somebody come in and at least give us a good estimate, of where we're at and what we can do. Because, I mean, this is gonna, in the long run, it's gonna relate to a lot of money coming out of our citizens' pockets.
But what's really the concern, Mayor, is that, but it's also when you look at the economic profile of the homes that are going to be impacted by this. These are what I'll call many are the more modest homes. Now, I can tell you, we have not done any type of analysis of Bayshore, for example, to determine how many of those homes have a mortgage. And I don't know that we have the ability to do that. But at the end of the day, this is not about some of the more affluent parts of the community. We are talking about some of the homes that are easily $100,000 and less in total value. The other thing is, we don't want you to feel tonight that you have to say, yes, we're going to do this, no, we're not. We're bringing this to you as information. We would like to have a decision one way or the other 2 weeks from tonight. But at the same time, we do not believe that this type of data analysis is within the purview of the staff for 2 reasons. Number one, you're dealing with a professional consulting firm that did this work for the federal government. You have to find someone who is their equal to try to convince them that the data isn't set up correctly. And then the second thing is, you know, you're dealing with, what'd you call it, 4 terabytes? That's apparently a lot. I don't know how much that is, but you know, you need somebody who knows how to work their way through the data.
So do we have any idea of how many properties this would really
About
affect?
1,300, about 800 additional properties that are there today.
Structures, there may be another 1,000 properties that
Well,
are
that's true,
vacant.
vacant. I hadn't thought
Hadn't
of
been
vacant.
built on.
Right.
Yeah.
2 other things. Number one, the surveyors, John Pierce and John Parker, they have been sharing data with us in areas that, like for example, the city, we had a surveyor prepare for a whole nother reason, elevations survey work on the marina because we purchased the marina. So we've got that data ready to give to this international company to include in that study, you know, if we decide to move forward with that. John Parker, John Pierce have also sent data for us because we're preparing for being able to send that information, actual surveyed points on the ground, so that if they put this location at, say, a 10, and the new models have it as a base flood elevation of, I don't know, 14, that we know what the actual ground is. The state modeling, they use LiDAR data, et cetera, but we'll actually have survey information. So John Pierce and John Parker have been willing to give that to us, and based on some of the stuff that they've heard about, you know, they've basically told us that it's, you know, in their opinion, you know, a necessity that we at least do this first phase to see, because of the drastic amount of change. I mean, if it was a 1 or 2 foot rise, but, you know, we've heard 4 to 10.
Now, this
I mean-
map is just for Onslow, or is it just for East North Carolina, or just for North Carolina?
Every county has their own maps that are being produced.
And they're rolled out at different times?
Correct.
Yeah, for example, New Hanover County, they've already had theirs ahead of ours. So this next rollout, I think, is Onslow, Jones, Carteret, Beaufort. There may be 1 or 2 other ones, but we're kind of in the next set that's going to be coming out.
I'll give you
I
an
was just going
example.
to say, normally, the idea of combining efforts with the county on this study makes sense in terms of saving taxpayers' money, but it seems like the county faces a lot of different kind of variables than we do, and I'm sure Swansboro seems to me would be getting bogged down in other study requirements that aren't related to ours, and we would get a report back that's tailor-made to the city of Jacksonville rather than mingling it with other studies. I'd be for commissioning this study.
If you look at the vacant lots downtown, one of the things that we have been very successful and proud of is the program that Reggie and Lily and the council brought forth for the public-private partnership. Most of the vacant lots left downtown will require FEMA flood insurance. Guess what? HUD will not allow us to build a public-private partnership house on any of those lots, because it now requires those people, if we were to build on one of those lots, to buy that premium increase because it impacts their spendable income. Now, so what I'm saying to you is, for all practical purposes downtown, if this program is adopted exactly like it is, our public-private partnership downtown has come to an end because of the HUD regulations. Now, that doesn't mean we won't move to another location. I will also say to you that I don't know that we're going to be successful. You know, there's the old adage, you can't fight City Hall. Well, guess what? You can't fight FEMA on a lot of this stuff. So we don't want to give anybody any false hopes that by spending $10,000, we're going to find a silver bullet. At the end of the day, we may all look back and say, well, that was a nice exercise. We could have had a community party for the same $10,000. I don't want to be the voice of being too skeptical here, but we've all lived with FEMA and the federal program for a long time. The only reason, in my opinion, that they are doing this is the slide that Ryan showed you. 20% of the claims have come from areas that were not required to have flood insurance. And we all know that the FEMA program is financially insolvent. So from one standpoint, this is an effort to put more people in the pool so that more people pay premiums, so there's more money in the national program to pay out damage claims.
Run that through again about the effect on the public-private partnership downtown, the HUD requirement. I'm not sure
According to
I understand that.
According to Lily's research and conversations with the HUD regulators, they will not allow the city to build homes like we have, because those people will now have to buy flood insurance. And that extra monthly expense will inflate the overall expense versus their income. Now, Reggie, can you explain that a little bit better than I did?
Well, you said it correctly. As you all know, the citizens that we service with our community development block grant funds are low to moderate income families. So they have less disposable income than a lot of the citizens. So for that reason, HUD has this requirement. They don't want to put another financial burden on them. They think maybe they can just afford the home that they have without this insurance. So their program comes with this requirement that if it's in the flood area, you cannot build on it with federal funds.
What about the units that have been built down there?
Well, fortunately, about half of those units are above the 10-foot elevation in that area, but 3 of those homes are below. And those people will, because they were built under the old program, I'm assuming that they're gonna have to buy the insurance.
They'll have to buy the insurance, and Dr. Woodard, as Lily told us, before these maps take place, and if you want to use the community development block grant funds, you could build houses before these maps are adopted. But once the maps are adopted, you won't be able to build using the CDBG funds.
I would think those ones in the area of Ford Street would probably be problematic, wouldn't they? Any
No,
of
that's
those
why we're
lots?
not building anymore on the Fort Street side.
Let's,
And that's another thing, some of the areas are not currently in a special flood hazard area, and we are hearing that it's going to expand. So you may have a CD home that was built, didn't have a 3-foot freeboard requirement because it wasn't in a flood zone, and now it's gonna be in a flood zone. So the second part of that equation is, well, what's the elevation? So they're gonna have to get a surveyor involved to see, okay, what is the elevation? And then they will have to determine, based on that elevation certificate, can we basically prove our point that we don't have to get insurance because we're above base flood, or, oh no, we're actually at or below and the premium's gonna be much higher.
Yeah, fortunately, the lots that we own on Poplar, because remember, that's where we built several of the public-private partnership homes, we only have 1 lot left there that we would lose the ability to put HUD house on. On Court Street, we have now built on every one of our lots on Court Street. On Newberry, all of those lots are high enough where we don't have to worry about the flood insurance if it's at 10 feet. All of those lots are good lots.
But that's not the only place in town where we may embark on these.
No.
These
What our
areas.
hope was to continue down Court Street, almost all the way down, buying every vacant lot we could, all the way down to Sturgeon City. Well, knowing what's ahead, we have stopped all of our efforts to secure any additional lots that we know are below the 10-foot elevation.
In addition, you know, it was preliminary information that we were providing in terms of the number of structures. They're still, those are preliminary maps. Those aren't even the draft maps. Those numbers may go up or down. So it may be better or worse.
Yeah. Why don't you let me recommend that you go ahead and package this thing up and bring it before the council in a couple of weeks. That's what you were originally saying, correct?
We just want direction from y'all.
And, is that all right with you folks?
I believe
Jerry?
Mr. Thomas had a question, though.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
what, you said special something, something flood area. Is that the same as flood zone? I mean,
Yes,
that's
sir.
what-
Yes, sir.
Because I have a house in Northwoods where I had a mortgage on it and I was going along probably 10, 13 years into it, and the people sent me a letter.
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, by the way, you're in a flood zone. And they showed me a map, and it was the back corner of the,
Right.
near a creek. And I said, well, the house is up here. And they said, well, you can get a survey. And I said, well, I got no idea. I'll part ways with y'all.
Well, and I've actually discussed with the same issue with a nice young lady that has a house over near Elizabeth Lake. And she got the same information. And we basically directed her to get information from FEMA that she could provide to her mortgage company to demonstrate that her house is actually not in a special flood hazard area. And that should prevent the mortgage company from requiring, because from what I've been told, the companies cannot require a structure to be insured if it's not in the area. So if they have a program where they say, oh, your property's in, they're gonna tell you, hey, you need to do this. Because if 50 out of 100 people do it, then great. That's just, extra precautionary measures. If you then call the city or FEMA and say, hey, this is what I'm being told, and we direct you to go through that process, and you can show to your mortgage company, hey, my structure's not in, you can't require this. Or you part ways with that company and find somebody else that's not gonna require it. Those are options that you can certainly go down to avoid being required to obtain flood insurance. However, the other thing it does is it allows you as an owner to think about, do I want to obtain flood insurance? Because if it's at the corner of my backyard, if there's a, storm of, 500,000 year storm, as we hear people, generically say, and it floods your house, if you didn't have flood insurance, then your normal insurance company's not gonna cover it. It allows you to make a decision.
That's when you call for it.
That's what you call it. The term that we were using is shown here on the screen, special flood hazard areas. The common terms that we all use that's the flood zone.
So is that agreeable to everybody to bring it back before full council and we're together in 2 weeks?
Is that why we're waiting for the full council?
I mean,
What are we gonna do?
Can we?
What are we gonna know in 2 weeks that we don't know
Yeah,
now?
don't know now. We're not gonna know anymore, are we?
Well, no, the real thing is, we just want you to make sure that you're comfortable with us spending the $10,000. If you're comfortable tonight, then certainly tell us that, and we'll proceed to get the contracts in place.
I'm comfortable.
I'm comfortable.
Yes.
Randy, you all right? Okay.
Okay.
And you got your direction.
Mayor, you want to take it as a motion second since we.
Yeah,
have-
somebody make the motion.
So moved. We authorize the staff to contract with XYZ firm to do the related flood study.
And you've already priced this out at
Yes.
$10,000, okay.
I'll second.
All right, any other discussion on it? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Council.
The next item that we have, we are now prepared to move forward with the budget. The capital improvement program, as you know, is a 5-year capital improvement. The only year that's actually funded and the only year that you are obligating yourself to is year 1. We would like to have Deanna and Greg give you a quick overview of the program that we're recommending in year 1. We're not asking you to adopt it tonight. The books are in front of you, and over the next series of weeks, as you study these, we would certainly welcome additional discussion. When you adopt the budget, that will be the time that you will actually adopt the CIP for next year. Deanna?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before we actually start with the proposed FY17 draft improvement plan, we'd like to talk about Fire Station 2. This is actually, as you know, previously in prior CIP, and it's constructed. We may recall that council granted a special use permit for this project, which included a 10-foot buffer specific to this location along Indian Drive. And the location we're talking about is the placement of the Leland cypresses. And as these Leland cypresses mature, our concern is that they're going to encroach upon the Duke right-of-way that is right next to it. And as you know, that Duke has the ability, as they mature, to come in and cut and or remove them at their leisure because it's encroaching upon their right-of-way. So the staff has some concerns with how they're going to look and the longevity of it. And so what we were proposing is to relocate the Leland cypresses to other city parcels and to bring back before council for your consideration a revised landscaping plan that would fit a little bit better within this 10-foot buffer. So we just wanted to bring this issue before you, and that we'll bring that revised landscaping plan in the next couple of weeks.
So you already have some areas identified to transplant these to?
Yes, sir. There are 90 trees. Duke has given us 1 year to relocate these, and in that time period, so we will not lose the investment. We'll simply relocate it.
What are we relocating?
Those
The-
little trees there.
Leland cypress.
And they're gonna grow how?
Yes.
They grow to 25 feet.
The best example I can give, does everybody remember the beautiful Leland cypresses at DeWitt Street right before you get to Forest Grove Avenue? Right underneath the power line, the homeowner planted them.
Planted them to keep people from running into his house, exactly.
And I don't know if you've been by there lately, but they're gone. And it started with they whacked them at the 10 or 12 foot height maximum. And then I think the homeowner since has removed them because they just did not look very good after they had been topped and trimmed. And that is what we're concerned about here. And while they're still young and they can be easily replanted elsewhere on city property, we want to do that now and come back in with a species that's going to be a little bit better this close to the Duke power line.
And the reason why we have to bring it back to you is you gave a specific site plan approval that showed this specific plant.
Okay, it was a special alternative design at the time, and that was approved by council.
So probably in the next council meeting or in April, you will see an action specifically authorizing us to do this.
So that being said, we will review what the capital improvement plan is. It's our planning document's a 5-year window. The current fiscal year is our capital expense. That's the project that's actually funded. And all the future years are planning. They show the cost or expenditure estimates for each of the projects we're proposing to undertake, and identifies probable sources of financing, and it helps us to evaluate, prioritize, and schedule our projects. So for some from comparison, as you can see, in 2015, we had 77 projects. In 16, we had 71, and we're proposing for this year 78. The majority of the projects, as always, are related to public services, where we do streets, sidewalks, sanitation, water, pump stations, etc. So some of the projects, and I know we recently went over the projects that were currently identified in this year's CIP, so we're going to just highlight a few of these. The prior year column, it identifies all the previous expenditures. The FY17 cost is an estimate of what we plan on spending, and the project cost is the estimate of the total project cost. On the Parkwood Regional Pump Station and Western Trunk Sewer Project, design's moving along really well. The next biggest obstacle for the city staff will be acquiring easements. We've identified roughly 180 days for that process. On the US 17 North Drummer Kellum Water and Sewer Extension, that's showing a prior year of 0. It's a project that we've identified in last year's CIP. We just haven't spent any money yet, so we've just shifted the expenditures over to 17. But on that particular project, we have secured some easements, and I believe are working with DOT on an encroachment agreement to bore under 17 to connect those services. Again, some other projects. As you all know, we've started the Lejeune Trail project. Construction began a couple of months ago. They've started at the controlled access break off of 24. Even though we've had a few delays, they're still scheduled for completion in October of this year.
if it ever stops raining.
Yes. The Richard Ray All-American Park, the contractor has been focusing on his work at Marine Chevrolet. That work is coming to an end, and they'll be moving over to the city parcel. They will be working to form the earthen embankment, so it'll start looking like an amphitheater. We're also in the process of city staff of putting out a proposal to purchase a floating fountain to go in the recently constructed stormwater pond. We're also working on forming a rail over the viewing wall so people won't fall into the stormwater pond. And then we're also constructing a paved access path, and that's all identified in this current fiscal year. And next fiscal year, we've identified some site lighting, some more sidewalk, and landscaping. The Jacksonville Commons Park and Ride, that's a project that we've been working on for a little while. We had a feasibility study where we identified several different sites. We actually were able to narrow it down to an area at the Commons, and we are working with our consultant to put together a environmental assessment, a very preliminary NEPA assessment for submittal to FTA for approval.
And before you leave that one, the value of the land will provide the match. So there really will not be any city funds that will need to be expended beyond the value of the match. And what you will wind up with is a very nice additional parking lot up there that can be a park and ride lot during the business day, and it can give additional parking for special events, for ball games, whatever. So basically, using the federal money through transit, you will be able to build a substantial additional parking lot up there with no city investment beyond the previous investment of the land value.
So moving along, these are what I'll call new projects. These are all projects that are going to be scheduled to start in FY17. The fiber connectivity project is where a project is proposed to connect 25 sites, pump stations, fire departments, outlying monitoring stations to high-speed fiber. The I&I, or the inflow and infiltration project, is our continuation of our ongoing assessment for identifying areas that need improvement. Of course, our FY17 sidewalk and street rehabilitation project.
And one thing on that, you will recall that normally we spend $180,000 on sidewalks. In order to put more money into paving, we're reducing that to $100,000 in the recommendation. But also remember, you have made substantial strides over the last 3 years by getting sidewalks in many places, especially Western and Gum Branch, where we did not have sidewalks before.
For our street rehabilitation project, as we've done in the past, we will evaluate the type of rehabilitation that's needed, either a mill and overlay or cement stabilization. The last couple of projects that we've done, we've really focused more on the mill and overlay. The proposed 17 project identifies 11 roads, which is just over 2.5 miles of roadway, with construction to begin in spring. And these are the street segments that we've identified. They're not all the street, but they're portions of the street along various areas within Jacksonville. The Holiday City lift station. This lift station is located in Holiday City, which is off of Corbin. The pink or red area is the sewer basin that serves this station, and the station's circled in red. This project would consist of the replacement of the wet well with a 400 gallons per minute submersible lift station, new risers, pumps, and flow controls with electrical service upgrades. We're hoping, we are reusing the existing wet well. We'll leave the existing structure. So there's no change in budget or schedule from last year's CIP. And right now, we've identified for design and the start of construction to begin in 17.
And while we're on Holiday City, there's a lot of I&I that comes out of that mobile home park. We are in discussions with a gentleman named Mr. Douglas, who represents the owners who are out of Colorado, about the fact that they are going to have to find the funds to do some internal improvements. I believe it was 2 years or 3 years ago, Pete, y'all did one major line on an area.
3 years ago.
3 years ago, where we had an easement. These other lines, we do not have easements. We're going to have to politely encourage the developer, because the I&I that comes through those lines is currently basically surcharging that lift station. But I want you to know we are working to, and I think cooperatively with Mr. Douglas, to try to address those lines. Pete, do you agree with that effort?
Yes, sir, 100%.
Another new project.
Those are
that-
our lines or the developers?
No, they're, I'll say it this way, Mr. Bittner, unfortunately, they're not our lines. And most of those lines are under mobile homes that have been there for a long time, and they leak
And they're
very
not
bad.
city streets either, are they?
No, sir.
Another new project is the Center Street Area Stormwater Project, and this isn't a new project for the CIP. This project was actually first introduced in the FY 2013 CIP, and the vision was to improve the drainage along the Center Street culvert, which is this right here. Oh, whoops. Okay, well, maybe they can
You're
fix
as
it.
bad as I am.
Yeah, they don't let me draw. Yeah, so it's the area in green closest to, do it now, there we go. So the project first is identified in that area to try to relieve some of the flooding and the washouts from the culvert. And so then the scope kind of changed due to some concerns with the scouring that was downstream, down in this area here. So we hired an engineering firm to kind of give us a holistic approach of how to fix both, and they came back with 6 alternatives. And at the time, the staff decided that the best alternative would be to fix the culverts, to put some concrete end walls on both sides, and also some stream stabilization on the downstream. So this is a concern, so we brought it back before council for consideration for us to undertake this project in FY17. Some other projects that we're working on is the Henderson Drive infrastructure improvements, what we'll talk about in just a minute. We've got an isolation valve at Northwoods and Ellis tanks. Right now, both of those tanks, when we have to drain them, unfortunately, when we do drain them, we have to turn off the water to a large area, not just the tank. And so we're going to put in an isolation valve that would allow us to isolate the tank from the main water source. And so that project's identified for this year. We've already talked about the Old Town Marina recently, and the downtown Rails to Trails Greenway extension is an extension of a trail along, down some connectivity from downtown. So that would be a preliminary assessment in FY17.
Black Creek, raw water supply wells.
I'm glad you asked that. We're gonna-
Interesting,
Yep, we're gonna talk about
interesting
that.
project there.
Yep, in just the next project, next slide.
Okay.
So one of the big projects that we have identified for next year is the Henderson Drive infrastructure. DOT will be repaving Henderson from about Jacksonville High School, the pedestrian mid-block crossing, to just about the other side of the bridge in front of Henderson Drive lift station. So as such, they have asked us to evaluate the infrastructure along that road from that period. So we're looking at the evaluation of 7,400 linear feet of sanitary sewer, 9,600 feet of water line, 29 manholes, and 95 driveway aprons. So we have started the process this year with some camera work that we've hired outside, because it's quite a lot to do. So Pete is going to assist with that work to try to get a preliminary assessment. Right now, we're also looking at some design alternatives. The infrastructure is in the road, and we're looking at possibly maybe putting the water line under the existing sidewalk. So we've got some challenges on this project. We've got limited right-of-way. We might have to procure or negotiate easements. So this is a project that will be very large scale for us to undertake this next year.
But the good news for the public is, well, I guess I should say it the other way. The bad news for the public is if you think Henderson Drive is rough today, just wait until we dig it up to take care of these lines. But the good news is the DOT has agreed that once this work is completed, that they will resurface basically all of Henderson Drive as we think of it today. So it's a very, very large project. What do you think the completion, are we talking about 5 years away, Ron, for the paving to occur? Do you have any idea?
No, as soon as they're done, as soon as
Yes.
we're done with our utility work, they're ready to come in.
Yeah, they've actually postponed the project a little bit, and they're working with us on our schedule. So they postponed it a little bit, but they're anxious to get started. So as soon as we have a better assessment of the conditions of the infrastructure, we can then come up with a plan. And it might be one of those where we do it in phases. It just depends on how our project lays out with DOT's project.
And if I'm not badly fooled, we're also, DOT's getting ready to expand what we call the extension from Gum Branch Road at Jacksonville High School over to Western Extension.
Correct. 4-lane, that section. Ron, what's the schedule on that?
Well, that one's more like 2020, but
That far out,
yeah,
I was
this
thinking.
is a maintenance project,
Right.
so this is
Right.
done with their annual maintenance contract.
Well, remember, 2020 is only
Yeah,
3.5 years
I was
away.
gonna say, I was thinking I thought it was a little closer than that, but it might not be.
Well, but they're already out there doing some surveying. I saw crews out there the other day, so.
There's actually 3 projects out there. You know,
Now you-
one of them's gonna be the intersection of Western and
Right.
Henderson, and then they're gonna widen the section from that point towards the high school. And then there's the extension behind the Longhorn. So that one is probably more like the 2020.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, what I'm calling between
Yeah.
Western and Henderson is pretty soon, like within a year or so.
The Black Creek raw water wells, this project is actually results of work that has been done with the Onzo Water Resources Group. And we're looking at installing 3 raw water wells and transmission mains for conveyance back to our distribution system. This project is mainly proposed to provide better spacing for the Black Creek wells. So we've identified planning and design to begin in 17 and construction to begin in 18.
Would you be shutting down, if you're trying to do your spacing, you'd be shutting down some that's within too
Yes.
close?
Yeah, we preliminary identified that wells 1 and 5, they are at the end of getting towards the end of their useful life, and they might be the ones that we actually decide to abandon. And there's, well 6 might also be included, but it's very preliminary at this point.
And also, while we are talking about, while it's capital improvement night, we continue to work with the state regulators relative to the withdrawal from Black Creek. The Black Creek has recovered much more quickly than people thought, and Wally and Pete and the staff continue to work, and Greg and Deanna continue to work to see if we can avoid this next reduction. So we will be bringing you a workshop shortly on that.
Some more projects that we're working on, Jacksonville Landing. We, this current year, we're looking at design of a welcome center. So FY17 will consist of the construction of the welcome center. So the project cost is a little misleading because that project cost includes the first phase, which was the purchase of the land and the construction of the landing itself.
And also, the good news is that money is already secured, and remember, a large portion of that came in your cooperative agreement with the county. So most of that is being funded by funds which the county has already given you, or given the project.
So another new project for 17 is the Indian Drive Booster Station. The station was constructed in 1962, and it conveys water from both sides of the pressure zones. So the project right now is proposed for new equipment and some related site work. The building itself appears to be in good condition, so we'll evaluate the building. We might have to make some repairs to the roof, because right now when you take the pumps out for service, you can't just take the pump out because the roof is too low. You'd have to actually disassemble the pump. So we're looking at, if we do use the existing building, that we'd have to make roof modifications to make that easier for maintenance. So we've identified design in FY17, and then construction would begin later on in 17. One of the recreation projects that we'll be focusing on is the Northeast Creek Park restroom and shelter. This shelter combination was constructed in the late 80s, and it's at the end of its useful life. This shelter is actually on the ball field side at Northeast Creek. It's the second parking lot closer towards where the lagoons that we closed in. That's the area of this shelter. So right now, we've identified the work that would be a demolition and replacement. We don't have any designs in hand yet of what we would like to see back, but that's the idea of what we would like to construct.
You know, there's prefab bathrooms like we did out at Wooten Park and even Richard Ray Park. Are those working well? Are those?
The ones at Wooten Park were actually the new design, and it's working very well. It's the same design we used at Jacksonville Landing. Our hope would be to continue that design as we move forward, because remember, their bathrooms on Northeast Creek is actually divided into two parks by the road. So you have the playground area and you have the ball field area. This is the beginning of a series of at least 4 years where we're going to be focusing on Northeast Creek. Northeast Creek has been a backbone park for this community. To say that these facilities are in need of replacement is an understatement. It's really, and I think that you will see as we go and tour some of these later this year, that these are projects that it's time for us to move forward with.
Saw where the playground side is scheduled for 18.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to swap that out and do both of them in 17 and put off the marina until next year? Or is that, I mean, just something for you to think about? I know you're trying to balance out the money, so there's no big surges. But
Well, actually, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, that's all right. I was just going to say I would rather see us take care of existing rather than worrying about the new that we're in. We've not done a good job of taking care of Northeast Creek Park. It's we all know that's been we keep pushing it back.
Yeah, the answer is we agree with you on your priorities. We also agree with you on the funding. In order to get grants, our beautiful and talented finance director, for some reason, has this hang-up, I'm saying it politely, that in order to sign the grant document, we have to have the money in the bank to match it. Now, the reality is, when you get the grant, you have 3 years in which to actually expend the money. So what I would say to you is, have patience. We are working through how we will do that. Don't be surprised if the Part F grant, which is a $350,000 grant, in order to secure it, we have to have $350,000 in this coming year's budget. But remember, the timing for approving that is much earlier than the timing for CAMA. So if we get the CAMA grant, which is a $200,000 grant, that is then going to free up $200,000 of your match. So there will be some, for lack of a better term, movement of funds as we get these grants in. But we don't at all disagree with your comment. This park has got to become the top priority. Gail, you good with that?
Yes, sir. So we wanted to showcase some of the projects that were added to the entire 5-year CIP. So this is just a recap of the projects that are new to the CIP that will be constructed in 17 or proposed for construction. In 18, we've identified the well house structure replacement, the Woodlands Park restroom, water and sewer service, and that project is a result of the agreement that the city has with JAZA.
Or shortly will have.
Yes. The Wooten multi-purpose facility and the Decatur lift station elimination. And then continuing with that, we've identified some infrastructure and streetscape projects and some further water and sewer projects for construction. And then just as a recap, that obviously if you have any questions or we need to talk about more projects in more detail, we're here and we'll be more than happy to give you more information. And we will work to prepare the final CIP, and then it'll get adopted with the budget by June 30th.
What we would ask you to do is go through the book and look at your priorities, bring back to us changes that you would like to make. If there are projects that are not in here that you would like to see added either for this coming year's budget or somewhere in the next 5 years, we would appreciate you letting us know those.
You know, just glancing through it, a couple of them caught my eye, but one of them, I won't be able to find it now. Let's see. It was talking about redoing the boardwalk between the bridges. What page is that?
Oh, that should be under,
Under,
I remember seeing that too.
I think it's under.
I looked at it just, but now I don't remember. Boardwalk, okay, 99. Now that's the part, we were trying to do this conversion, right?
That's correct.
It's
Page
page 99.
99.
Page 99? It was the old,
Yes, sir.
the old boat landing. I thought we had discussions of trying to make that back available to the private sector to develop
We do.
into downtown.
We do. And
Okay.
remember, if we are successful in getting the conversion, then that opens up that new opportunity, and it would set aside the need to do this. If, on the other hand, we are not successful in getting that conversion, or we get the conversion and we don't find someone who is interested in building there, then that boardwalk is getting in such disrepair, we need to address it. And that's why you'll notice that it's not in the 17 funding year.
Right.
And of course, depending on how long it takes us to move forward, because the process is already months behind, you may see this project slip to 19 and 20, and then eventually 20 and 21.
And was the county part something that's been agreed to, or is that just a number we came up with, or?
It is, you want to answer that?
So when we looked at the total cost of the project, that the parcel, the boardwalk runs across city parcels and the county parcel. So what we did was, just for budgeting purposes, we just applied a per linear foot cost for each of the entities. So no, this has not been, as far as no, we have not talked to the county about this project.
Okay, thank you.
Well said.
Must be waiting till November.
Councilman Warden, on the Henderson widening,
Yes.
the current schedule in the tip is 2024. That's more than likely going to be moved up, and the estimate is that might be 20 to 21.
Okay. No, and nothing about the Longhorn portion. That'll be a little further out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That one definitely is not one of those that's going to move up quickly, but the widening.
Has that been funded?
Say again?
That's not on the funding list?
Well, the widening is
Widening,
now.
yeah,
That was
is.
the additional funding that become available.
On the other side of,
Well, the other side of it.
Western
yeah.
to Gum Branch, that's one that's funded. Western back towards the hotel is not.
Right, it's out there, but it's not in the funded area. I think it's out in the 10-year thing, not in the
Yes.
5-year.
Yes.
What will drive that project will be the extension of Jacksonville Parkway all the way out to Ramsey Road. Once that is funded, then you will see the pressure to make that connection. And anyone who has had the experience of being there on Jacksonville Parkway at 5 to 5:30 knows that the traffic is already backing way up behind the area for the coat factory and Kohl's and so forth, very heavily used.
let me ask a question that's not really related to this discussion. But Ron, you kind of keep up with all this stuff. That Connect NC bond, what kind of impact, if that were to pass or fail, would it have on any projects that are going on?
Well, the biggest impact for Onslow County is at Hammocks Beach. There's some funding in there for Hammocks Beach, and there's also about $7 million for the community college.
But there's no road projects?
No
they
road,
took
no
it out.
road projects went forward. The original bond had a slug of road projects as well as the other type projects. The legislature did not support the road projects. They would rather, that's why they added additional funding to the STI projects. and that rather than go out and they wanted to follow the STI process as opposed to coming up with a list of projects like the bond issue did.
Now, Ron, let me see if I'm correct in this. My reading of the bond is that this bond is not about transportation at all. It's about community projects. Is that your interpretation?
And university.
A lot of college, community college and university projects. There's a slug in there to modernize National Guard facilities across the state, and there's
Water and sewer infrastructure, there's both grants as well as loans in the water and sewer side.
But the two that benefit the Onslow County area, again, are which two?
Hammocks Beach and
College.
Coastal Community College.
Thank you. On your capital improvement budget, we would remind you that the funding for these come from the Water and Sewer Fund, from the Stormwater Fund, from the Powell bill funding, and then also from your 4-cent initiative. The normal ad valorem tax that's left after the 4-cent initiative does not apply to your capital improvement budget. Be happy to answer questions, and like I said, over the next several weeks, we would encourage you to contact staff for more detail. We'll be happy to take you out and look at some of these, and likewise, you'll be asked to adopt this or its successor in time when you adopt the budget sometime May or June of this year.
I had a question about, it's going to take me a second to find the note I had here. It was on the Sturgeon City Environmental Center. Maybe I read this wrong. I can't find the page now.
29, I believe, sir.
Well, I don't know what page it is on the digital.
Oh, digital may be different. Yeah.
Paper copy.
When I was reading this, let me see if I can see it again. I know that we dedicated, well, there's $4 million in phase one, or 4.8 million now, I think, right?
Well, let me review that with you.
Okay.
When we issued the bond issue for the Center for Public Safety and for Fire Station 2, it also contained $4 million for the Sturgeon City building. We have spent a portion of that for design and engineering work. Our latest opinion of probable cost is shown here at, $4.8 million. There is a shortage of funds. As you and the council will recall, we have been hung up through environmental issues on that site. John and staff have been working on that for more than a year. We had a meeting about a month ago with the, what used to be called DENR, now called DEQ. DEQ?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And we hope that we're making some progress towards getting the environmental issue. At the end of the day, council is going to have to make a determination of one of three things. Number one, that you are going to build the building and you're going to add to the current roughly $3.6 million additional funds in order to build the building. And I'll remind you, this cost estimate is several years old, so the opinion of probable cost will have to be updated. That's one option. A second option is you're going to have to decide, do you want to not build this and look at the issues financially that means, and we will bring you back a detailed workshop on all of these options. The third option is to simply relocate the facility and build it somewhere else. And then the fourth option is to decide that you're not going to build this, but use the borrowed money, the borrowed funds on some other similar community project. Now, we will be giving you, and as Mr. Thomas has pointed out very correctly in our discussion about a month or so ago on this, that is your construction cost. It does not include, pick a number, another $500,000 to actually furnish it, nor does it include the money to operate it. So this will be a very detailed workshop that we will lay out to you our research legally on what the bond council is telling us your flexibility is, and what your options are, and the pros and cons of each option.
But when I was reading the budget impact on this, and it broke it down, that $4 million on the bond that was dedicated towards this, it was $150,000 payback on the
Tourism.
from TDA. There was 75 from the city, 75 from the authority.
Correct.
That was just in phase one.
Correct.
But am I reading this right, that in future phases that Sturgeon City nonprofit is responsible for the whole enchilada, the whole thing for all phases?
I think the answer to that would be potentially the $75,000 requirement can go up. It was the way that the approval was given is that they, and we can get the exact minutes, but as I remember the minutes from reading them just a couple of months ago, they will give a minimum of $75,000. John, do you remember exactly?
That's correct. We pulled them out and looked at it. It could be adjusted depending upon other factors. But we have the minutes.
Yeah, I think, but the mayor's question is more towards what says phase one is being funded by the city of Jacksonville. Future phases will be funded by a Sturgeon City nonprofit.
Well, let me
That
address
was the original concept.
Remember, Sturgeon City, and don't hold me to the exact number, is a $16 million project.
Right.
So this is actually technically it's phase 3, because there were 2 other phases. Phase 4 and phase 5 and phase 10, we're not talking any obligation for the city to fund. That's for you and a future council to decide. But with this building in phase 3, that is that's the project described here. And that is what currently the agreement with the Sturgeon City Board of Directors is, that they will contribute $75,000 a year towards that bond payment, or potentially more based upon, we can go back and pull out that agreement. But you are right, Mayor, the city, if you build this building there, the city is not obligating itself in any way to the future phases.
The other thing, and it was on the, we get a final word from Diener?
Not yet, sir. No,
Okay.
sir.
Right.
And that has to do, the mayor's question has to do with the pollution issue relative to soil contamination there. And Deanna has been working, well, we were all out there about a month ago and still have not gotten a final answer. Do you have any thoughts?
No, they asked for some additional information on some of the site assessments that we've previously done. So we resent that information, and Ryan and I met to try to draw a line that would have subdivide the larger parcel into a smaller parcel, that we would have land restrictions related to just this building. But we haven't made any progress yet as far as the state being ready to move forward.
And tying your first workshop into this conversation, if the flood maps are adopted,
Yeah.
then you're talking about additional design modifications to flood-proof that building.
Well, that's probably the worst flooding area in all of Jacksonville, down in that area. That's what we experienced in Fran. So.
But once again, that's a workshop that when we have a little more information, more conclusive information regarding the environmental issue, we will be bringing a workshop topic to you to decide what do you want to do regarding that building.
Moving parts.
A lot of moving parts, and a lot of them have large financial implications. In closing this part of the capital improvement program, I would certainly like to take a moment to tell you that the cover of the splash pad, when it went to the whatever Facebook or whatever you call that stuff that's in outer space today, we had over 60,000 hits in the first 24 hours of interest about that splash pad. They range from what in the world is a splash pad to I sure hope adults can come, to I sure hope the city maintains it once it gets in, to I don't think we should have wasted the city taxpayers' money on that. So as you can appreciate, there is a large spectrum, but we are very pleased to tell you that we're moving forward with that project. What we would like to do at this point, Mayor, if you would like, is to go into closed session, and then when you're in closed session, you can take a moment to get a refreshment, and then the city attorney has a matter that he needs to discuss with you on pending litigation.
So I'll make the motion. Go to closed
Second.
session.
All in favor?
Aye.